On today's show, I know when the Dallas Mavericks are going to make their next big trade to help push this franchise forward into title contender status. It's time for a Mavs Christmas Carol, where they'll be visited by Mavs ghosts of the future, the present, and the past. All that and more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavs Past.
Mavericks, NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good! And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show, making Locked On Mavs your first listen today. But the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day, leave a 5-star review, like the video, and comment anything below. Let us know in the comment section, how far do you believe the Dallas Mavericks can go this season? First round, second round, playoffs, no playoffs, lottery, let us know. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Like I said, it's a Mavs Christmas Carol today. The Mavs will be visited by ghosts of the past, the present, and the ghost of what's yet to be. What did Charles Dickens say? The ghost of Christmas yet to come. Ghosts of Mavs yet to come. That's the future. So we'll get into all that. And I want to just break down a couple of things. Kristaps Porzingis went on the JJ Redick podcast, The Old Man and the Three, to talk about 2021 and the playoffs. He admitted something that all of us knew. But he admitted something. Did it change how we should view that playoff series and his time with the Mavericks and all that kind of stuff? We'll look at the Mavericks, the ghost of the Mavs present. What is this team capable of right now? We're 20 or so games in. The in-season tournament's behind us. What are the Mavericks capable of doing? Let's look at that. But let's start here. The ghost of Mavs yet to come. The Dallas Mavericks will make a big trade. It will come this summer. And it has to for the Mavericks. Because this is where you are this summer. Next year's roster. You've got Luka and Kyrie making $83 million, both under contract. The cap is going to be $142 million. And so they'll be making 58% of the cap. Not bad for your two stars, right? They've got Tim Hardaway at $16 million on an expiring. He'll be making 11% of the cap. Not terrible anymore, right? That contract went down. It was a declining contract. The cap's been going up a decent amount. And so 11% now is not terrible for Tim Hardaway. Then you've got these mid-tier role players. Grant Williams, Maxi Kleber, Josh Green, mid-tier as far as their salary. Josh Green contract, he's making $12 million. That's his contract kicks in. That's only 8% of the cap. Like sometimes we have to look at some of these numbers for the Mavericks and their contracts in the future and say, all right, well, it's 8% of the cap. 2 years ago, or in 2018, 2019, it would have been 12% of the cap. And in 2015, 2016, that would have been 17%. $12 million is not the same anymore. You can't look at $12 million and think it's a big part of your salary cap anymore. So they've got the main guys, they've got role players, and they've got these guarantees. This is all for next season. Derek Lively at $5 million, Dwight Powell at $4 million, Omax at $2.8 million, and Jaden Hardy at $2 million. It's non-guaranteed, but I'm pretty sure they'll pick that up. Then they've got some decisions to make. Rashawn Holmes has a $12.8 million player option. I'm pretty sure he'll pick that up, and then he'll become an expiring contract. Seth Curry and Dante Exum both have non-guaranteed contracts next year. Then you got Derek Jones Jr. is an unrestricted free agent, and they've got to make a decision on that this summer. So I say all that because the Mavericks have a lot of their roster still. Derek Jones Jr. is the only one there where you're like, all right, they've got to re-sign him. Curry and Exum, they just can guarantee their contracts and they're back. Derek Jones Jr. is the only one where you're thinking, man, they've really got to keep him because they do. He's been really great so far this season. And so now you look at, all right, what can they add to this group? Because the group that they have now is basically the group they're going to have next year. So they have these assets this summer. They'll have a 2025 first. If the 2024 first, the draft pick this summer is actually finally given to the Knicks to end the Porzingis contract. Talk about the ghost of Mavs past with this draft pick. It's been on the books forever, it feels like. So if they give their draft pick for this draft to the Knicks, finally goes through, then they'll have a 2025 first, a 2027 first, and a 2031 first-round pick. They'll have 3 first-round picks this summer that they'll be able to trade because the 2031 is a swap and not a trade, so they're able to trade that 2031. Following me? They'll also have 2 seconds. I believe they're 2026 and 2028. Whose second-round picks they are, I have no idea. We'll have to wait and find out. There's like so many different clauses, but they'll have 2 second-round picks. They're basically all the same. And then they've got Tim Hardaway and Rashawn Holmes with expiring contracts that are at $29 million. If you add Maxi's to that, it's not expiring, but I don't think it's that terrible. He would have 1 more year on top of it. But if you add all 3 of those contracts together, that gets you to $40 million. So you're talking $40 million, 3 first-round picks, 2 seconds, plus you've got Jaden Hardy and you've got Omax on rookie deals that are young, interesting players. Like, you've got a bunch of stuff all of a sudden this summer that you can look at and say, hey man, we can take all this stuff and go get something. We can go get that third player that the Mavs need, or you can go ahead and spread these out. Say, let's attach Tim Hardaway in a first for, a big wing. Let's attach Tim Hardaway or Rashawn Holmes in a first for another wing. Let's send Maxi Kleba in a first for a backup center. You know what I mean? Like, they can all of a sudden start taking these assets this summer, and I think that's when they make the big trade because they have these assets now, but they have 1 first right now. They have 1 first right now. They have 2 seconds that they could use right now. So for all the Jeremy Grant, Kuzma, like the players that could potentially take and require a first-round pick, I don't think they want to mess around with that. I don't think they want to do that this year. So maybe the second-round picks. Maybe you're looking at, all right, at the trade deadline. Remember last year at the trade deadline, we kept saying, wow, it would have been really nice for the Mavericks to have a couple second-round picks because they grease the wheels. Like, they just grease you through. They grease some trades through, right? Second-round picks are the lube of NBA trades. And so they've got 2 of them now because of what Nico Harrison did this summer. And so they can maybe do something like that for a smaller trade this year. But after the draft, around free agency, they'll have those contracts that'll change over to expiring contracts. They've got 3 first-round picks in the future. And all of a sudden now, you can start looking, and what could they do with that? Well, they could trade for Mikal Bridges. Let's say the Nets are middling and they're hanging out and they're like, man, I guess we're building around these guys, but like, what are we really doing here? Let's try and build for the future. Let's try and do something. And so they look at Mikal Bridges and say, he's got 2 more years left on his deal. He'll be 28 next year. So he's not like this super young guy. He's in his prime, but he's not this super young 23, 24-year-old that they're building around for their like deep future, right? They say, okay, well, let's trade this guy. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. We don't know what the state of the Nets will be by the end of this season. They could also do sign and trades. There's 5 guys I think that they could potentially sign and trade for, where you take those expiring contracts. Remember, Tim Hardaway, Rashawn Holmes, their contracts together equal about $30 million. And then you could add Maxi, you could add Josh Green, you could add maybe Grant Williams even, and you could get to $40 million. That's huge. You can get to $40 million with just those 3 guys plus the first, and they're not really going to kill the other team's cap space. Like, they're not going to kill the team's, not their cap space, but their salary caps going forward. So you take those guys plus the 3 first, and could you sign and trade for OG Anunoby? Probably. Could you sign and trade for Pascal Siakam? Maybe. Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Drew Holiday, all 5 of those guys will be free agents, and you could do a sign and trade type thing for them, like they did for Grant Williams. I think all 5 of those guys push this Mavericks team forward and push them into the potential contender status, right? They could also, like I said earlier, split all these up and get multiple pieces, because they still do need multiple pieces. They need depth. Depth is so important in the NBA, especially right now. Just look at who are the teams that are doing really well right now. The Nuggets and the Celtics. They just have a really deep top 5 that fit really well. And then they've got a couple other pieces. Your Al Horfords, your Christian Browns, your guys like that. That's what I think the Mavericks will do. I'm looking into the Mavericks future, the ghost of Mavs yet to come. Could it be Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Drew Holiday, or multiple pieces? I think they'll do it this summer because they have all those assets that they could trade this summer. And I'm looking at it, and it looks pretty sweet that the Mavericks could do this. So that's what the Mavericks could potentially do in the future. Coming up, let's talk about the present, the ghost of Mavs present. What can the Mavericks actually do this year. Let's talk about that and see what they're capable of coming up. Today's episode brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You can go check out Prize Picks right now and see what's available. I love Prize Picks because you can combine a bunch of different stuff. If you're watching a couple different sports, maybe you're watching Cowboys on Sunday Night Football like you were this week. Maybe you're watching some Mavs. Maybe you're doing, there's no NBA and NFL at the same time, but let's say you're doing some of that stuff. You can combine a bunch of those. All you have to do is go to Prize Picks. I'm on there right now. There's a Bulls and Bucks game, which is super random, but let's go. Damian Lillard, 24 points. Oh my gosh. I'm going more on Damian Lillard. Right. 24 points. Let's go more on that. Giannis at 32.5. Give me less on Giannis at 32. And then Kobe White, 19.5. Now give me less on that. He may hit it because Zach LaVine's been out and all that, but let's say I put all three of those down. I put down $20. I can win 100 on the power play. If I put down just $5, I can win $25. That's just fun to go check out that, see what you can do on Prize Picks. Plus, they have injury insurance where you can go and they have a reboot policy where if your player goes out in the first half, you can they have injury policies. Their player will be rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com.
How about that?
Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. Tomorrow, be back with Slightly Biased, and we will break down the Mavericks versus the Grizzlies. Man, Mavs all of a sudden playing a bunch of games here. And so we'll have all that covered this week, and then they'll have a Lakers game on Tuesday, so we'll be here for that. All right, the Ghost of Mavs present. What is this Mavericks squad capable of right now? What can they do? Well, right now, if you look at the standings, the Mavericks are third in the West. Feeling okay about that. Feeling pretty good. At least you're up there, right? At least you're 5 games above 500. But if you look up and down the standings and the state of some of these teams, there's really only the Denver Nuggets that you're really super worried about, right? Everybody else, you look up and down and think, the Lakers, if AD is not the AD that we saw in the in-season tournament final, the Mavs can take him, right? The Mavs can take that Lakers team. They're starting Cam Reddish. They've got our boy C. Wood coming off the bench, getting DNP CDs. They've got, Torian Prince. Like, they know they can guard those guys. They can outscore that team. And that's how you win basketball games. You look at the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're super dangerous, and they hit the Mavericks where it hurts, but what did the Mavericks they just went on a 30-0 run against them, like without Kyrie. Like there's ways that the Mavericks can win a game like that, and they're super young and inexperienced with a rookie center. The Mavs have a rookie center too, but hey, that negates it. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they're number 1 right now. They're 17-4. Incredible story so far. They've been way better than a lot of people thought. The Mavericks can beat the Timberwolves. Minnesota's offensive defense falls off like 5 points, like for their offensive defensive rating, 5 points each way when Rudy Gobert sits. And what does Luka Doncic do better than maybe anybody is cook Rudy Gobert and like negate him on offense and on defense. And so I think that's where the Mavericks will have the advantage there. And then Minnesota is only 17th in half-court offense. So when they get to the playoffs, maybe they'll have fixed that by then. But like the half-court offense is what really propels you forward in the playoffs because everything slows down. All the defenses ratchet up, and you've got to just be able to get buckets. Can Cat get buckets? It can't all just be Anthony Edwards. He's not that good of an offensive initiator. There's not many that are. It's like Luka, maybe Steph, Jokic, LeBron. Like there's just not many players that can be your offense in a playoff series. That's next level stuff, and it's what makes Luka so special. So you look up and down those standings, and you say Denver's the only one you're really worried about. The Mavs are 4th in half-court offense so far this season, and they're 16th in half-court defense. Now, 16th in half-court defense, but the Utah game really skews this. That's a real big outlier. They're probably closer to like 20th or 18 to 20. Let's say that. Like if you take the Utah game out where they just blew Utah out and Utah couldn't score, their defense is not that good. Their offense is about 4th in half-court. They were good on half-court defense against the Lakers, the Pelicans, and the Magic. In all 3 of those games, the Mavericks had a good half-court defense. So at least they're capable of it in some way. But that's what I think makes a good playoff team. And so if you look at this team right now, I would say as long as you can avoid Denver in the first round, the second round of the playoffs should be your goal. I think you can push it forward. I think the Mavericks have been a little bit better than I thought. And then the whole West has been more disappointing. I mean, look at some of these teams. The Warriors are 10-12 and can't really figure stuff out. The Grizzlies are 6-15. They're getting Ja back, but not before the Mavs play them on Monday. The Suns are 12-10. They get Bradley Beal back here soon, but we'll see. Clippers are 11-10, and they won didn't they win 7 straight or something with James Harden? These teams have just not been as good as some people had thought, including myself. And I think the Mavericks now, hey, if these teams aren't going to put it together, we can beat anybody in a playoff series because you got Luka and Kyrie. They're both playoff risers. They rise in the playoffs. So I think right now, the goal for the Mavericks, what are they capable of? What can they do? They can win a first-round series and should probably win a first-round series unless it's Denver. Denver is the one team you look at and go, whew, just got no answers. And guess what? No one else in the West does either. They're the only team like that. Can anybody beat the Mavericks? Sure. But Denver's the only one I'm like, oh man, I would pick against the Mavericks. Let's say we fast forward all the way to the Locked On Mavs and Locked On, whatever other team, Lakers, Kings, Timberwolves, whatever, that crossover that we do to preview the playoff series. The Nuggets would be the only one where I would go, you know what, I'm going to pick the Nuggets in this one. I wouldn't pick the Mavs in that series, I don't think. And the Mavericks right now, what does their playoff rotation look like? They've got Luka, Kyrie, Grant Williams, Derek Lively, Derek Jones Jr., Tim Hardaway. That's a top 6 you actually feel pretty good about. They've all been solid. Derek Jones Jr. has really surprised and stepped up into that spot. In the role that I thought Josh Green would have, he stepped into it and has been very good. Then Josh Green's probably your 7th. And then your 8th is like a wild card for matchups with Dante Exum and Seth Curry. You get very different things with both those guys. But there could be a series where you need Dante Exum. There could be a series where you need the shooting of Seth Curry, right? You got both of those things. And so I feel good about either of those guys. And then the 9th spot in a playoff rotation is the Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, Rashawn Holmes, memorial 10 minutes of backup center time, right? Like 10, 15 minutes of backup center time that they'll play. That's what Jason Kidd likes to do. That's what he did with Dwight Powell in the playoffs 2 years ago. And then you got the wild card with Jaden Hardy, Omax. Maybe either of those two guys find their way into the rotation and make a case for themselves to play in the playoffs by then. Or, here's the or that you guys all like. Buyout player. Mavs could definitely get a buyout player. They've got Kyrie. They've got Jason Kidd. They've got Luka. So they got Justin Holiday last year, and the team was bad. They got him in a buyout, and, for all he turned out to be, but it was a buyout player that a lot of people wanted. So they could get a buyout player and add that player to the rotation, or you could do a small trade, one of those trades for the second-round picks that I talked about earlier. And that's the Mavs playoff rotation as of right now, and we'll see how it changes and see how it moves, but it's pretty good. You've got 2 all-stars. You've got some role players that do some things. Derek Lively being really good and Derek Jones Jr. being good have really made me feel a lot better about this rotation so far if you're going into a playoff series. But that's what the Mavericks, this present Mavericks team looks like, and that's what they're capable of doing. At least that's what I think. And so let me know in the comment section what you think. What are the Mavericks capable of? What do you think they can do? How far do you believe they can get this season if that rotation is going to be what it is? And if these teams that we're seeing in the West right now stay the way that they are. So that's what I think about it. Coming up, let's talk about the Mavs of past. Kristaps Porzingis went on JJ Redick's podcast to talk about the 2021 playoff series. Remember where he was just standing in the corner, and he admits he was just standing in the corner. And I don't think he liked standing in the corner. And what he admits, I think, is kind of interesting, and it proves what we were all seeing, basically. We'll talk about that coming up. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is the best and the best sportsbook in America's #1 sportsbook. Go check out, see what they have available. Go to Locked On or FanDuel.com/LockedOn and see what they got for you. They have futures. You can't bet on past things, right? I can't do the joke that I've been doing the whole show. But you can bet on futures for the Mavericks. Let's look at where their title odds are right now. Right now, the Mavs are plus 2,700 for the title. The Timberwolves have overtaken them. Well, they've got the #1 record in the West, but it's Celtics, Nuggets, Bucks, Suns, Sixers, Lakers, Warriors, Timberwolves, then Mavs at plus 2,700. The Mavs are above the Clippers, the Kings, the Heat. That's kind of wild. The Thunder, way above the Thunder, plus 4,500 for the Thunder. And they're second in the West, right? So go check it out at fanduel.com/lockedon. See what's available. And if you put down $5 on any money line and that money line hits and you win that one, say you put it down on the money line for a team to win a game, boom. You get $150 in bonus bets if that team wins. So put on the Mavs, put on the Cowboys, put on the Mavs for this Grizzlies game. Come on. Luka's not going to lose to the Grizzlies. So put $5 down on the money line and you can win. You get big on that. So check it out. FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, Isaac, let's get into the Mavs of the past. Ghost of Mavs Past. Kristaps Porzingis comes back and haunts the Mavs in a way. He went on the Old Man in the Three. That's JJ Redick's podcast. It's great. I listen to it probably almost every time it comes out. Excellent stuff. Around the 24-minute mark, JJ Redick starts asking him about Dallas stuff, why it didn't work out with the Dallas Mavericks. And it was interesting to me. He blamed maturity first, his own maturity. And if you think about it, he was in the 2021 playoffs. That was only like 2.5 years ago. It was really not that long ago for him. But he's been through a lot. He went to the Wizards, spent the year there. Now he's with the Celtics, and maybe it changed his mindset. But really wasn't that long ago that he was on the Mavericks. Like 2 years ago, really, he was on the Mavs still. But he blames maturity. He blames that he didn't really care about analytics, which I thought was interesting. And I saw Haralabob comment on it that he had never really approached Porzingis with any analytics specifically during his time there. But I thought that was very interesting that he pointed out I wasn't really into analytics that much, and I didn't pay attention to that. And so some of that is his pushback on the way he was being used. Remember, Rick Carlisle wanted to push him into the corner and wanted to make him a spot-up shooter because he wasn't good at the post-up stuff. Everything that people were raving about Kristaps Porzingis about in Washington, oh, he's been so much better attacking smalls in the post, attacking mismatches in that way. He was bad at that with the Mavericks. Like, he just wasn't good. And so Rick Carlisle was like, hey, we're not going to do this. And remember, he had that whole quote that was talked about so much on NBA TNT with Shaq and Charles Barkley about how post-up was a bad play and how, like, you don't want to post up anymore. But it was about Porzingis because Porzingis wasn't good at that. And so that's probably what Porzingis is referring to. It's like he was relegated to be a spot-up shooter for the Mavs because he wasn't efficient at any of that other stuff. And then JJ Redick asked him about this, which this confirms everything that we had heard, Isaac and I have talked about over the years, that people have talked about with Porzingis. Was there a pissing contest, basically, between him and Luka? And he said there was in the beginning. Absolutely. Kristaps Porzingis thought that he was better than Luka Doncic. He had already been an all-star in his career. Should he have been wrong about that? That this rookie coming in, remember he got traded during Luka's rookie year. And then they ended up playing together Luka's like second year in the league. Porzingis had been an all-star. Luka had not. You kind of can't blame Porzingis for that. But like 1 year in, you should probably look at it and say, man, this dude is so much better than me. Let me get relegated to my spot and let me become a 2. And he didn't want to do that. He realized he thought he was better than Luka, and that'll change things. Look at how Kyrie has fit into his spot so far this season. Take out last season. that doesn't count. But Kyrie fit right into his role and knew it. And Kyrie has done almost more than what Luka has done so far. He at least won a title. And so Kyrie could come in and be like, hey, I'm the number one. But he's not. He's fit right into his role. He's done a great job seamlessly fitting in, doing the things that the Mavericks have asked him to do, and being almost like a glorified role player in a good way. And then kicking it up when the Mavs need it on offense. And we wish he would do it a little bit more and hope that he gets healthy. And he's going to be out for this Grizzlies game, and all that. And so I think that the first part about Porzingis admitting that there was this like pissing contest between him and Luka is telling, and that he has matured from that, and that he would admit it, I think is big for him. So good for him to look at that and say, man, I was immature when this came around. And that's one of the reasons why it didn't work. Luka and Porzingis were amicable and they would work together. And there was times when it looked really good, but he kept getting injured. And there was also this immaturity. There's also immaturity on Luka's part for sure, too. JJ Redick tells a story about when he was with the Mavs and he was on the bench and Porzingis comes out of the game and Rick Carlisle was yelling at the Mavs to stop being a baby. He was yelling at all the Mavericks, stop being a baby, stop complaining and whining. And KP looked at Rick and said, hey, Rick, tell Luka to stop being a baby. Because that's who Rick was referring to. And then Rick turned down the line like Rick Carlisle does. Turned down the line, looked down at Luka and said, hey, Luka, stop being a baby. But then you get to the 2021 playoff series where this is where Porzingis was like basically relegated to be a spot-up shooter. He wasn't being utilized as much, not as much as he was in the bubble. And it was just this big shock for like all of the national people that hadn't really watched the Mavs as much as we do. And they saw it and went, what are they doing with Porzingis? I mean, there's 2 games. Game 5 and Game 6 against the Clippers, he took 6 and 7 shots. He didn't take more than 13 shots in one game that whole series. You're talking about the other all-star that's supposed to be the one that is like right there with Luka. There was never a part in this series where he took more than 13 shots in a game. That's wild to me. But it's where he was. He wasn't efficient. All this stuff was getting to his head, it seemed like, and all that. Yeah, Tim Hardaway took 30 more shots than Porzingis did that whole series. They played all 7 games because Porzingis played all 7. This is not the one where he was injured. This is the 7-game series against the Clippers where he was just pushed into the corner. Tim Hardaway took 30 more shots over the course of a 7-game series than Porzingis did. That's where they were. And they took that Clippers team to 7 with Kawhi, with Paul George. They're healthy. They played all 7 games and all that. I mean, that was a feat. The Mavericks were not favored in that series, remember. And so Porzingis talks about it, and he talks about that series specifically. And he said this, reflecting back on that series, I should have just said, okay, this is what you want. I will do that to the best of my ability. Talking about just basically on offense, standing in the corner. And then he said, but at that point still, I was a little bit young. And then he, kind of walks around it and says, kind of out of spite, I went, on purpose, I will not move from this corner. That was a little bit of mindset. It was not correct. He admits that he was not basically fully bought into his role with the Mavericks at that point, especially on offense. Now, he goes on to say that he was locked in on defense and put 100% of his effort on defense and all that. But on offense, he was like, I'll just stand here and not do the extra stuff, not do the little stuff that helps a team win in the playoffs. I'll just stand in this corner. If that's what you want me to do, I'll just stand in this corner. You almost can't really blame him for it a little bit because he had been an all-star. He had been this guy. He was all bubble team the year before. Remember, he was scoring like 30 points a game in the bubble and doing really great stuff. And we were like, this is the Luka and Porzingis duo that we really wanted to see. And then this next year comes and he was just not the same. He was really not the same player. Couldn't get that shot going. The post-up stuff wasn't as good and all that. And so he took 30 less shots than Tim Hardaway did in that series. Listen to this. He took 8 more shots than Dorian Finney-Smith did all series. Crazy. That's pretty crazy if you think about it. And so Porzingis reflecting back on it, I thought it was interesting. He blames his immaturity for his lack of like effort and intention when it comes to that series. And could things have been different? I don't know. If Porzingis had bought in a little bit more and like took the analytics seriously and took the numbers seriously and all that, would the Mavericks have won that series? Probably not. Probably not. That was the series where, they were up. Remember, they were up 2-0. And then that was the one where they went up like by 20 points in game 3. And everyone was saying, oh my gosh, they're about to go up 3-0. And then the Clippers won the next 2. Mavs won game 5. And then Kawhi went off for 45 in game 6. And then in game 7, Luka had 46. What did Porzingis have in game 7? Because Luka had 46 in game 7. And they still lost. He took 30 shots. Porzingis went 6 of 12. Missed all 5 of his threes. And only scored 16 points. Who knows? The ghost of Mavs Past coming back to haunt them. Let me know in the comment section, where do you think this Mavericks team in 2023 can actually go in the playoffs? Be back tomorrow talking about the Mavs with Slightly Biased. Also, check out the subtext. Subscribe to the subtext and you'll get all kinds of Mavs updates, rumors sent straight to a text message on your phone. Help support the show. Let me know what you think about it, guys. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.